Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. He is the author behind so many of the stories we love. Carrie, It, Misery, The Shining, The Shawshank Redemption, The Outsider, and The Stand, coming soon to CBS All Access. His new book is If It Bleeds. Please welcome to A Late Show, Stephen King. Stephen King, your entire career has been imagining horrific scenarios. How are you handling this one in reality?
Well, I'm doing it like everybody else. I'm sitting at home most of the time, and when I go out to the grocery store, I wear my little mask. And when I come home, I wash my hands because I can imagine. Imagination is a terrible thing sometimes when it turns against yourself. I can imagine germs as big as wagon wheels on my hands and crawling up my arms and into my face.
Well, what do you make of the current horror story that we're in, and one of the central characters, which is our president?
Well, you know, the thing about drinking bleach just kind of bowled me over. And people have been telling me for years, you know, that I sort of foresaw Donald Trump. I wrote a book called The Dead Zone. And there was a character in there, kind of a TV comedian type guy who appealed to the common people and told everybody that he was going to solve the pollution problem and the problem of garbage. He was going to shoot it all into outer space. And then he would hand out hot dogs and he'd say, "You're going to say hot dog when you elect Greg Stilson president." And really, shooting garbage into outer space compares pretty favorably to injecting bleach into the human body, I think.
Yeah, I think it's on par. How, if you had written the scenario we're in right now, would it have gone this way? Like, is it playing out the way you would have imagined it?
Well, I wrote a book called The Stand in 1975 or 76, sure. And I'm still apologizing for it. 40, 50 years later, people will come along and say through their little masks, "I feel like I'm living in a Stephen King story." And my response is, I'm sorry for that. But when I wrote it back in the 70s, I just had this idea based on a chemical spill in Utah. And I went to a doctor that I knew and I said, "Could you give me a scenario for a pandemic that wipes out 99% of the Earth's population?" And his eyes lit up. I mean, they love that sort of apocalyptic what if scenario. And he said, "Well, the flu would be the best thing. It's a virus. It's not dead. It's not alive. Nobody really knows what it is. But the thing about the flu is that it's the gift that keeps on giving, because every year it comes back, but it comes back in a different form so that you need a different shot for it." And my fear, Stephen, about the coronavirus is that we may get things back to normal and then the virus mutates and it comes back, which leaves two possibilities. One is that it comes back much weaker and it's not much of a problem. But the nightmare scenario, which of course is where my mind goes, I'm sorry, but it does, is that it comes back more lethal than ever.
Now, your new book is called If It Bleeds. Well, it's actually
you know
four
what, Stephen?
stories.
I just happen to have a copy of it right here.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
You do?
It's marvelous. There it is.
Well, look at that. Great
Oh
minds
my
think
God.
alike.
We each have a copy of it. It's fantastic.
What is the role of a horror story right now when we're living in a sort of a dystopian future?
Well, I think that people do kind of gravitate toward horror stories when times are tough and times are scary, and that's certainly true now, because when you go to a horror story like If It Bleeds or Gerald's Game or any of the stuff that I've written, all of which are available by mail order or curb service from your local bookstore, correct? You read it and the situations are even more horrible than being under house arrest with no toilet paper. And when you finish, you close the book and you've had a place to put your fears for a little while. You've been able to say, these problems are much worse than my problems. And then you close the book and you can go to bed and sleep like a baby. At least that's the theory.
Who of the characters you've written would you least want to be quarantined with, or most? Either one.
It's not even close. I wouldn't want to be quarantined with Annie Wilkes because she would think that I was a cockadoodie brat, and then she would say, Stephen, I have a wonderful idea for a book, and I want you to write it, or I'll cut off your foot. So I wouldn't want to be quarantined with her. If I had to pick somebody that...
What about Jack Torrance? You'd be okay with quarantine with Jack Torrance from The Shining?
No, I wouldn't be okay to be quarantined with Jack Torrance either, because I'd be afraid that he'd start writing all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy. I'd be worried about that. But I could be quarantined with Holly Gibney from If It Bleeds. She's got her OCD bells and whistles and ticks and talks, but she's pretty good. So
she's a fan favorite, and she's back for this collection. People will be happy to see that.
She is.
Now,
I don't know if she's a fan favorite, but she's my favorite. So people are going to be stuck with her for this book anyway.
I have to ask you about this. You recently were asked for your top 10 favorite books, and you put The Lord of the Rings on your list. I am a huge fan of Lord of the Rings. What is it, from a novelist's point of view, what do you like about The Lord of the Rings?
Oh boy, that is one of the books that taught me how to write fiction because, okay, so the hero is a hobbit. He's a little tiny creature with furry feet, and he eats 12 times a day. And we know there are no such things as hobbits, but he's an ordinary guy, but he's got a big heart, right? He's got a huge heart and a lot of courage. And we all wish that we had that, particularly in times like this. And he sets out on a quest with his friends. And I love stories about friendship, strong fellowships. And I think everybody does. Who's your favorite character in Lord of the Rings? Can I ask that?
Well, Sam.
Sam Gamgee was my favorite character in Lord of the Rings. No doubt about it. Because the line that I always remembered, and it actually brought tears to my eyes, is when the ring finally got too much for Frodo. Sam says, I will carry you, Mr. Frodo. And he does. It's a beautiful moment, beautiful story.
I like when they're on the plain of Gorgoroth and they're about to go up into the Sammath Nar, the cracks, to throw the ring in there. It's the night before they go up, and he looks at Frodo and he sees a light coming out of Frodo. He perceives him as a vessel of light, and he goes, well, he loves him, he realizes, and he says, well, he's like that, and sometimes it shines through. I just love that moment where he just realizes that how much love and admiration he has for him.
It's a simple story, but it's well told, and you can fall into it. It's particularly good in times like these, and I think you and I would both say to people who are getting fed up with being quarantined, and that's a good place to go. That's a good place to put your heart for quite a long time, because there's a lot there. But it's one of those books that when I got to the end of it, I said to myself, it's going to be a long time. Maybe it's going to be years before I read anything that's as good as this again.
Stephen, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me here.
Thanks for the new book. If It Bleeds is on sale now. Stephen King, everybody. We'll be right back.